part of the reason you haven't seen Amazon get into this, it's an industry that has a lot of local network effects.
If I'm a small, mid-sized player and I could exit right now, I'd probably exit.
B2B Distribution has a variety of different verticals. Building materials being one of them in the US has over $100 billion in value and throughput every year. There's a lot of fragmentation in the building material industry that covers all of the products that are going into homes or new construction jobs, also lumber and all the related supplies that are helping to build the homes and buildings of today. Amazon has not gotten into building materials in any kind of serious way recently. Right. It's definitely a heavy logistic fulfillment type of industry, which I think has kept out a lot of the Amazon, Walmart, Alibaba tech platforms from coming into the space. There are things that are on the fringe and more commoditized, more pack and shippable in building materials. Right. But the large majority of it is definitely heavier, which is just harder for them to penetrate from a logistics and fulfillment standpoint. What are the other things that you've been looking at in this space, Nick?
Yeah, I think part of the reason you haven't seen Amazon get into this, it's an industry that has a lot of local network effects because of that heavy shipping component. Basically, if I'm a building materials distributor, I typically only ship the heavy stuff within maybe at most a couple 100-mile radius of a distribution store. Mm-hmm. Because once you start to get further away, the further and further you get, the higher that fulfillment cost is going to go up. So if, for example, there's a lot of these kind of e-commerce type websites for building materials, if I try to order something like 500 square feet of siding and I want to get that delivered, the fulfillment cost can be upwards of 20% of the actual cost of the good. And that's prohibitive for making that model kind of work because they're shipping it from centralized warehouses that's too far away from where I am. And it just doesn't make unit economics just don't make sense. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do in a lot of these more heavy material industries in B2B, which doesn't fit the Amazon model of having one warehouse that can serve a big area, is really you need to have a lot more local supply. So you need to get up a lot of these smaller distributors, of which there's a lot, and really figure out how you consolidate them together into a marketplace and leverage their local fulfillment capabilities rather than having everything run through a more centralized kind of hub and spokes model. You've seen a lot of these businesses pop up in emerging markets. So you have a number of these things popping up in China and India, in markets like that. I think a little less so in the United States, where I think you've seen Supply Hog, which never got a lot of traction and got, I think, acquired for a small amount. But definitely see a big opportunity for distributors to get into this because they have the footprint, they have the customers, and they have the tools that they could offer, speaking of kind of single user utility, in terms of things like financing, inventory management, tracking deliveries that a lot of these smaller shops just aren't going to have. So there's a lot you could offer to bring these smaller shops on board and really extend the footprint of what you're able to serve.
And I think, a couple things. So what we have seen in the industry, we've seen a lot of consolidation.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of the mid to large size players gobbling up the small to mid sized players. We've even seen large players gobble up large players.
Yep.
CRH, which owned Allied in the US, that was sold maybe a year or two ago now for a handsome sum. And so you've seen a lot of consolidation at the top of the industry. And I think one of the reasons that companies like a CRH and which is a European holding company, and they also do a lot of manufacturing, I think you're seeing a number of companies that are in the manufacturing space of building materials that maybe also had a distribution arm that was built up over the decades. And they're kind of saying, I feel like some disruption is coming. I feel like there's definitely some new marketplace type of models on the horizon. And I just don't want to play in that game. I want to stick to making products, and the distribution businesses were kind of a bolt on over the years anyway. Yeah. And so I'll let that stuff go if I get a nice price. And by the way, they're getting nice prices. So, if I'm a small, mid-sized player, and I could exit right now, I'd probably exit, right? Take me out of this, because there's going to be a lot of shakeup. And I think there's a lot of older owners. There's a lot of just older folks that have been in the space, and change is hard and challenging. So there's going to be change. It's just a matter of when it comes. It's inevitable because there is fragmentation. There's a lack of pricing transparency. The buying process is very arduous.
But if I'm a general contractor and I'm trying to get materials, it's not clear to me how much something's going to cost, what's available, without having to call up a bunch of folks. It takes a lot of time, and there's no easy way for me to get that information. And a marketplace really could come in and solve that quite well.
And I think the large incumbent distributors would actually find that a lot of these marketplaces start at the bottom of the market. And they might be seen internally as somewhat competitive or cannibalistic to the core business, maybe in 2 or 3 years after the marketplace is going. But at least initially, I bet there's a lot of small contractors in the LBM industry that are not even on the radar of the large distributors.
They're not the kind of customers that they're just from an economic standpoint set up to serve.
Right.
Those customers are not well served by the current sort of large distributor system.
Right.
Those people in particular would love a marketplace. And you could basically have this be accretive, certainly in the early stages.
At least in the early days, while you prove it out.
Right.
And get validation of it. Thanks for watching our latest clip. If you enjoy the content we're creating on Winner Take All, please feel free to leave us a comment, subscribe, and definitely join us on our next live stream.